please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Stacy Smith.
It's fantastic to be here. I appreciate so much being welcomed to this room, but I have to admit, when we started studying music at the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative at USC, I thought that meant that the events would start in the early evening or later. And so just flying in from New York and then having to hop back to LA and then off to the Cannes Film Festival, I'm a little sleepy, but I am going to depress you, so be forewarned. I want to start off on a positive note, though, before you're going to need to be anesthetized with some of the numbers that I'll present. It is so refreshing to be at an organization that starts off the day with a form in front of everyone about an inclusion pledge, because I think all of us that are interested in issues of diversity and inclusion are really interested in ensuring that everyone feels like they belong. And if people feel like they belong and there's equity in the workplace, safety becomes something that's eviscerated and minimizes exponentially in those contexts. And so it's an honor to be here amongst a group that cares so deeply about this issue. So just to get started, I want to briefly tell you a little bit about what we do at the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. We do a few things, three things really well, to be honest. We do research, advocacy, and action. And for about 12 to 14 years, we've been studying very meticulously film and television and looking at how women, people of color, the LGBT community, and people with disabilities are doing on-screen and motion picture content and digital content and television content. And we started having conversations not too long ago that music was something that we needed to focus on, and that individuals from underserved communities may or may not be faring too well, particularly women, when it comes to participating in the artistry or the executive ranks of music. And so we decided to do an inaugural study and lay out a program of research. And I want to tell you about the first investigation that we did not too long ago. We released it right before the Grammys, and it got a little bit of attention, if you might have been paying note of the press. So I want to overview that investigation and then tell you where we're going with the initiative. We've already done subsequent studies, but where we're heading in the future. So let's take a look at what we've been working on at our lab. So for the last couple of months, what we decided to do was take a look at the 600 popular songs according to the Billboard Hot 100 charts. And those songs were released from 2012 to 2017. We were also interested in who was receiving Grammy nominations around the same time frame, from the 2013 Grammys all the way through 2018, or just last January. What we did for all of the individuals on the charts, we looked up over 1,200 individual performers, another 2,700, almost 2,800 songwriters, and 651 producers. And we were interested in asking one particular question: how are women and people of color doing in these particular positions on the most notable charts according to Billboard? So, our central question that we teed up for this investigation was this: how inclusive is the music industry when it comes to performers? Now, I'll just give you the headline right up front. When it comes to women, they're not. Across 600 songs from 2012 to 2017, women are clocking in at about 22%. And if you look at the overtime numbers from 2012 to 2017, there's not a lot of movement, there's not a lot of change, and actually 2017 was the worst year for women on the charts across the 6 years investigated, which requires more exploration. The gender ratio of performers in popular music is 3.5 males to every 1 female. Now, Performers can come in a lot of shapes and sizes. They can be artists, they can work in bands, or they can participate in duos. And so we wanted to take a look at how women were actually faring when it came to these different ways in which they could express their artistry. 22% of all artists overall were women. 32% of these artists were individual artists receiving credit as performers. Very few women were a part of bands, less than 10%, and roughly 5% are in duos. Now, one thing that's interesting here, especially with the band findings, it makes me wonder if women don't gather for some reason, given that these numbers are so low. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, but I think this is an area for inquiry, why women aren't being discovered, promoted, or even pitted against one another when it comes to thinking about participating as a performer in a band or a duo. Now, one of the things that we do with our research is we're really interested in how much individuals are working across different platforms. And so what we did is we took a look at performers and the total number of credits that they amassed across the 600 songs. And what you can see by this next chart is there's a profound difference in the number of songs credited to male artists on the charts than female artists, but not too terribly different for the top couple. Matter of fact, there's a few Canadians on the list. I thought that might make a few folks happy in the room. And as you can see, the individual with the most credits across 600 songs was Drake in terms of male performers, and the second top performer was Rihanna. Now, I think this underscores something that film, digital, and television storytelling haven't received the memo on. Individuals from underrepresented groups do quite well in music, but for some reason it doesn't translate into other platforms. They can be a global phenomenon in music, but they cannot when it comes to other media. Let's just take a look at how individuals from underrepresented racial or ethnic groups are doing in music. They represent 42% of the artists on the charts. This is remarkable. In the United States, roughly 40% of individuals identify as underrepresented. 50% of the 0 to 5-year-olds in the United States come from underrepresented backgrounds. So when it comes to music, music is on point with the trends in the United States. What I want to draw attention to is over half of all of the performers, all of the artists, over half were underrepresented in 2017. So the music industry is really a leader when it comes to issues of representation vis-a-vis other media. Now, it's one thing to take a look at who the performers are on stage or in the recording studio, but we were also interested in understanding the inclusivity of the music industry when it comes to songwriters and producers. And here we see a sharp turn, particularly for women. If you take a look at all the songwriting credits, which is not always easy to amass, we had to do this using ASCAP, CSAC, BMI for all of the individual credits, we see that quite closely that females are often written off as songwriters. Across over 2,700 songwriting credits, we see that females are only accounting for about 12% of those credits, with not a lot of variation over the last years. This raises some really interesting questions about whether female artists are even asking for female songwriters, and the importance of that connectivity to ensure female songwriters working over time. Now, we again took a look at the individual credits of all of the songwriters. We wanted to know how often male songwriters are working in comparison to their female counterparts. And as you can see on this next slide, there are credits and deficits when it comes to gender and songwriting, and males are outpacing females quite significantly. It's not going to surprise anyone in this room when you look at the top male artists by number of songwriting credits. The Swedes are doing quite well. Max Martin, of course, has the highest number of individual credits across the sample of 600 songs, over twice as many as Nicki Minaj has as a female songwriter. The most important thing on this slide, though, the most important aspect of the information is, and I hope it comes in here, what I just brought in when we think about music's ability to culturally impact individuals around the globe. If you look at all of the individual credits, it's really remarkable that 9 male songwriters, 9, the ones on the list, are responsible for roughly 20% of the 600 most popular songs from 2012 to 2017. That is a closed network where 9 men are setting the agenda when it comes to the popular charts, and something that merits further exploration. Now, songwriting, so we go from 22% of female artists, 12% of female songwriters. We then turn to producers. And we only looked at 300 songs for producers because we didn't think it was necessary to explore the entire sample, because we were fairly certain that the trends would emerge with just 300 songs. And sure enough, those patterns were quite consistent across the 3 years investigated. Only 2% of all producers in the sample, producers of the songs, were women. Now, this isn't too terribly different than what we found for engineers, whether it's mastering or mixing. They came in at around 3%. So there's a real cliff when it moves from performing, songwriting, to producing. And let me punctuate just how problematic this drop-off is. If we're to look at the producers over those 300 songs, the ratio is 49 males work to every 1 female working. And to then think about who are those women, only 2 out of 651 producers were females from an underrepresented racial ethnic group. Yet over half of the performers are minority in terms of race ethnicity, but only 2 women of color were given credits as producers. It's a complete disconnect in terms of who might be calling the shots and who's working in the recording studio. Now, the last question we asked in this investigation, just for relevancy, that ended up striking a chord with many people and was picked up heavily by the press, was just how inclusive are the Grammy Awards when it comes to gender. We only looked at 5 major categories. It was only 5, and I mentioned that if you were following the press on this issue. Only 9.3% of the categories we investigated of Grammy nominees from 2013 to 2018 were female. And as you can see in the Producer of the Year column, across the years investigated, no Producers of the Year that were nominated were women. Females are only doing well in the Best New Artist category, yet nowhere at proportional representation to the world in which we live. Now, this was just the first investigation that we did. We've looked at the Latin charts. Women are doing far worse on the top Latin charts than they are these overall top 100 trends. We've done a deeper dive into engineering, and we're about to announce a large-scale investigation looking at the barriers and the opportunities facing female songwriters and producers as they navigate their careers. But for future research that we're aggressively focusing on, we have an entire map of where we're going for the next 3 to 5 years. We will be looking at additional positions in production, instrumentalists, session singers, and the opportunities they have for employment. We're very interested in music executives and the proportion of women and people of color filling those ranks in companies and labels and agencies, et cetera. And we're really particularly fascinated to drill down into A&R and where the disconnect is between finding new talent and the categories that we're examining in our investigations. And we'll also be doing another event later in the summer looking at the live segment and women's experiences touring and at festivals. So be on the lookout for that late summer. In terms of barriers and opportunities, our work will be qualitative in nature. We'll be doing lots of interviews with women and men, asking about women's experiences as songwriters and producers. And importantly, we're concerned with the pipeline, as we've been with our work on film, television, and digital. How are new artists identified? How are they curated? And how does that relate to executive talent? Also, educational experiences. What is the path for people interested in the business side and the artistic side and music? And thinking about festivals and the role that programmers play, and how does that vary by gender and race and ethnicity, given the goals of the festival? How does that map on to who we're seeing on stage? So please be in the lookout for the research that we'll be doing in months to come. But what's more important, I think, than the numbers themselves is the solutions that we will be rolling out based on the data. And if you're interested in being a part of the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative and working with us towards large-scale change, please don't hesitate to come up and talk with us afterwards, because what we plan to do, just like in film, television, and digital, roll out practical solutions so that the needle will move as quickly, so that everyone that has the talent has the ability to participate, not only equitably, but in safe work environments so that they might thrive. Thank you.